Interesting fact about public speaking. Usually when you get up there, you have about 30 seconds for someone else in the audience to decide whether they're going to listen to you or open up and start scrolling on their phones. So how do we become an engaging public speaker that people want to listen to? You're in the right place. My name is Jess Ekstrom. I'm a Forbes top-rated speaker and founder of Mic Drop Workshop, which is on a mission to help more women get paid keynote spots and speak with confidence at work. If you want to join our next free training, hit the link in the caption below. So the first thing that we want to do when we want to engage an audience when we're speaking, whether we're in a meeting or whether we're giving a commencement address or no matter what it is actually give some pause in between when we get up there to our speaking spot and when we actually start speaking. So for example, and I know I'm going to get off the mic for a second, but if we start talking before we actually get to our spot, it's going to look like this. Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that kind of exudes some nervous energy. So instead, what I want to do is I want to do something called the start button. So the start button is a helpful tip for you, but also for your audience to kind of show I'm here and I am ready. So what I want you to do is I want you to wait to start speaking until you get to your spot and your position on stage. Take a breath, and then I want you to step into the first thing you're going to say. So it's going to look something more like this. I remember when I was standing, and that's when you start. And I said, I remember when I was standing. I meant to say, I remember where I was standing. It's beside the point. But what I want you to do is I want you to pause before you speak, wait till you get to your starting position, and then step into the first thing that you're going to say. Now, you don't need to keep walking and keep moving around the room. I'm actually going to show you how to use your body language and when to shift and when to move. But I want you to start by stepping into your talk, and that's your start button. That's a really great way to start engaging the audience early on. The second thing that I want you to do is eye contact. So eye contact virtually is kind of hard, so you need to stare into that green dot, which I'm trying to do right now. But when you're in person, again, it doesn't matter if there's 2 people in the room or 2,000 people in the room, I want you to help humanize that room by looking into the eyes of your audience individually. So instead of looking at a sea of people, I want you to say something to one person, switch, say something to another person, and switch. That way, for you as a speaker, it helps decrease your nerves because now you're speaking to humans instead of a sea of people, but it also makes you a really engaging speaker. They're like, whoa, that she's speaking to my soul. So that is really helpful when it comes to engaging your audience, is eye contact and looking at each person in the audience as you shift points. So in a previous video, I talked about how to organize your talk. I'll put that video right here and also in the description for you to watch after. But essentially, when we organize our talk, we put it into 3 different parts for each point that we want to make. We have the setup, we have the story, and we have the takeaway. So what I want you to do to become an engaging speaker is to practice shifting between each part. So when we shift, we move our positioning and we change our slide, and we also change our tone. So instead of just standing in one position the whole time or pacing back and forth all the time, we have intention behind when we move and how we move. And actually, the audience is not even noticing that this is a pattern or a cadence that happens, but you're the one who notices, and then they just stay engaged the whole time. So for example, let's say I'm talking about why people should listen to the story that I'm about to tell. So I'm standing on the left side of the stage, or maybe the left side of the room. And then as I get into the story, I'll do some sort of transition. This reminds me of a time when, and then I'll shift to the other side of the room or of the stage. If I'm working with a visual aid or a visual presentation, that's also when I'll change my slide. This is also helpful because as you're walking to the other side of the room or other side of the stage, you can actually see that the slide changed instead of looking behind you and being like, did that go? Because no one likes that. So I want you to shift your positioning. I want you to change your slide if you're using slides, and I want you to change your tone. That helps whether you're speaking up or speaking down, just give some diversity in your tone and your inflection to keep the audience engaged. Another thing you can do to keep your audience engaged is non-distracting audience interaction. So what do I mean by that? There's different kinds of ways that we can engage our audience by interacting with them, but sometimes the interactions can be more disruptive than they can be helpful. So for example, if you are giving a talk and you say, turn to your partner and talk about a time when, it can be really hard to get people back to you. And as a speaker, you don't want to be the kindergarten teacher. You don't want to be like, okay, everyone, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, let's bring it back. You want to keep control of the room. So instead of saying something like turn to your partner and having them discuss, unless you're in like a workshop or a training session, that would work. But if you're giving a talk, try not to lose control of the room by telling them to talk to each other. Instead, a good non-distracting way to interact with your audience is raise your hand if. Raise your hand if you've ever felt this, or raise your hand if you've ever done this. Keep your hand raised if. That's a really great way to help have people identify themselves, engage with you as a speaker without losing control of the room. One thing that I would add to remain inclusive is anytime you have people raise your hand or have them stand up, always add if you are able, because we never know who's in the room and we never know if they are able to stand up or if they are able to raise their hand. So always raise your hand if you are able or stand up if you are able. Another way to engage the room that you're speaking in is to know the language that they speak. And I'm not talking about the difference between English or Spanish. I'm talking about the language that they speak at their work or whatever it might be. So for example, before I give a keynote, I always hop on with the person that is giving the event and say, is there any language that I should be aware of? What do you call your customers? Do you call them members? Do you call them clients? What do you call your campus? What is, what is this mascot called? Whatever it might be. You want to know what's the language that they speak. That way you can use that language in your talk to make sure that you're staying in the same line as your audience and keeping them engaged instead of isolating yourself as someone who doesn't know who they are, who they're helping, and who they're serving. Another way to keep your audience engaged is energy level. So let me tell you a quick story. I was actually filming a public speaking course for LinkedIn Learning, and when I was in their studios, we had wrapped. We had finished all the videos, but they were like, look, we still have an hour or two of studio time. Do you want to go back through some of these videos and just go nuts? If you were giving us a 9 on the scale of energy from 1 to 10, give us a 12, give us a 13. And they're like, we already have everything we need. What's the harm? So we went back through and we started with some of the videos, and instead of giving them this like polished, very like reserved delivery, I went crazy. I was getting into the camera. I was speaking big and speaking loud, and I was giving him a 13. And then when we went back and watched it, I realized that the energy that is sucked from a camera or from an audience, you might think that you're at a 10 when someone else is actually perceiving it as a 7, because the time and energy in between where you're standing and someone receiving it can actually dissipate. So always add 1, 2, maybe even 3 degrees more of an energy level to your delivery than you think is necessary. Now, I'm not saying to change your role. I think one of the pet peeves I have with speakers is, who they are off stage is totally different than who they are on stage. You don't necessarily need to flip a switch, but how can you amplify who you are in your energy level just by 1, 2, maybe 3 degrees? Because that can actually help you in your delivery and staying up, but also help keep your audience engaged, because the energy from where you are to where they are can sometimes go down. Thanks for watching. If you want more public speaking tips, I have another video that I've included in the caption along with our free training, and make sure you subscribe.